There's no question that the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to get a stranglehold of college football, or it's just working out that way, whether they're wanting to or not. Only three teams in this past season's top 15 were in a league other than the Big Ten and the SEC. That's Florida State at 6, Arizona at 11, and Notre Dame at 14. All the other teams in the top 15 are either in the SEC in 2024 or the Big Ten in 2024. And that's why it looks like the college football playoff, I've been wearing this shirt a lot lately, the college football playoff very well could change and fracture the way that we've done college football for good. NIL, the sport's not necessarily changed. Transfer portal, I mean, you've got guys moving, but we've not seen the total destruction of conferences because of that. This could do that, and we could just have a time in the near future, maybe a decade from now, where you just have the Big Ten and the SEC. That's really kind of all that survives in the future of college football. I think a lot of people, that would be sad. I mean, what would happen to Arizona? What would happen to NC State? People like that, Louisville, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. I don't know, but they would have to kind of pick sides, and there's such a discrepancy now in terms of revenue and who's going to make money, win or whatever. That's really the reason why Clemson filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit it's on its merits just kind of laughable, but they know that they've got to do something. They've got to force pressure because they're getting left behind. All the ACC schools are getting left behind in terms of revenue. And the college football playoff now, the way that its revenue is, the TV contracts are one thing. This is just a second punch on that front. And, if you're Florida State, Clemson, if you want to say Miami, if you're any respectable football program, you cannot stay in the ACC for the duration of this contract. The problem for them, of course, not to get into that whole thing, is there's no good way out of it. There's just no good way out of it. If there were a good way out of it, North Carolina would have been gone by now. I'll just tell you that right now. Florida State would have been gone. Clemson, North Carolina, maybe Miami, I don't know. They'd be gone. They'd be in the Big Ten or whatever. And I think we're going to see a day in the next 15 years where, unless something changes with the way that the ACC and the Big 12 are structured, maybe perhaps those two conferences combining somehow. But this isn't like it used to be. There are a lot of ties that are binding the Big 12 and the ACC, binding those schools together. But the only game in town right now is the SEC and the Big Ten. That's all there is to it. And I think that's why we've seen, Clemson won 2 national championships in the college football playoff era. Ohio State won 1. Michigan won 1. Frankly, those have been anomalies. It's basically been the SEC. Well, I forget the Clemson, forget the Michigan and Ohio State part. Clemson's been the anomaly. They're the only school outside of those two, the power conferences that have won it. And I think that's what I'm saying here is Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Miami, they're going to have to figure a way out of this thing. If you look at, but there's just not a lot of draw for Arizona. There's not a lot of draw for Louisville, NC State. I'm going to read the teams that are ranked at the end of the year that are not SEC or Big Ten schools going into the near future here. Florida State. Okay, is there a market for Florida State? There's a market for sure. Is it worth what the other SEC schools, the Big Ten schools are being paid? The answer to that is no. Arizona, is there a market for Arizona? There's not a market for Arizona. Is there a market for Notre Dame? For sure. There's a market for Notre Dame, no question. Is there a market for Oklahoma State? No, they're just like Arizona. What about Kansas State? No, they don't matter. Louisville, they do not matter. NC State, they do not matter. SMU, they do not matter. Kansas, they do not matter. Liberty, please. So, when you keep looking, Oregon State, Tulane, James Madison, no. Memphis, no. Troy, no. Carolina, North Carolina, yes, that's a different story. USC, obviously, they're in the Big Ten. Air Force, I mean, we're getting into schools that just are irrelevant. No one cares about Duke. And, what people want to see is Georgia play Michigan. They want to see Ohio State play Alabama. which was so. I mean, those games never happen. They want to see Texas play, Notre Dame. They want to see Texas play Georgia. They want to see Texas play. Obviously, they want to see them play Oklahoma. They want to see the big schools play. And the market has spoken here. It's very simple. They do not. I mean, no one cares about Georgia Tech. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no one cares about that game. It's not a game that turns people on. No one watches it. It's just not a big deal. It's a bigger deal than Georgia Vanderbilt. It's a bigger deal. It used to be a bigger deal than Georgia Kentucky. It's not anymore. It's only a big deal in Georgia. It's only a big deal when Georgia Tech wins. It's only, so there's a lot of problems with that. Georgia Tech does not belong right now. Georgia Tech does not belong in the same athletic world as Georgia. And when you look at the athletic departments, they're not the same. You can't compare Georgia Tech to South Carolina. You can't compare them to Kentucky. They're not even close to Kentucky in terms of the athletic department. And the reason why is not because Georgia Tech gave up 2 decades ago. That's part of it. That's not all of it. That's part of it. The other thing is they've gotten into some terrible situations with these contracts with ACC. And so the future will be, the NFLization of college football. And a lot of folks aren't going to like that, but more people than a lot of folks are. I mean, they're going to want to see big brands. They're going to want to see LSU's women team. They're going to want to see them play Iowa or play South Carolina's women. That's what people want to see, brands. They want to see what's a big deal. They don't care about James Madison. All due respect. Those kids work just like everybody else. They are a good athletic department, quite frankly, but they're not a brand name. And, the days of, Georgia's a bad example. But the days of, like, everybody's getting riled up for, I was going to say Wisconsin. Wisconsin does okay. But the days of, the Miami Pitt game mattering in any way, the days of Miami playing Pitt and it being on national television, that's never happening again. Like, not consistently and not in a meaningful way. And the future of college football will be about what is broadcast. How large are the audiences? How big are the fan bases? Which is why North Carolina is such a prize pig in all of this. And how many of them will pay to watch their teams play? Because that's the future. It's the college football playoff. ESPN, Disney, News Corporation, or Fox. That's all they're going to care about because they're paying billions of dollars combined in order to bring this to the masses. And they're going to have return on their money or the sport's not going to exist. Well, we know the sport's going to exist, so they're going to figure out a way to create money for everyone. Now, people say, well, this is about money. I hate it. This was never about money. Yeah, it's always been about money. It just has. Herschel Walker didn't just go to Georgia. Now, whether that was because something illegal happened, against bylaws of the NCAA happened or not, I don't know. But he didn't go to, it wasn't picking between, Georgia, Clemson, and, Southwest Missouri. He was picking between the big schools because that's where all the attention was. That's where the money was. So it's always been about money, period. And if it wasn't, then why was Notre Dame always independent? Why did South Carolina want to come into the SEC so bad? Why did Georgia Tech make such a huge mistake leaving the SEC? These were all money-based decisions or money-based ramifications from them. Tech left the SEC because it was aggravated with Alabama and Bear Bryant and some recruiting stuff. But the truth of the matter was that was a massive mistake. It was a huge mistake. If Georgia Tech were in the SEC right now, they'd be far more relevant as a program than they are right now. I mean, what sport are they good at? I mean, I don't know. It's not basketball. I think Brent Key's doing a really good job there, but it's not football. And, baseball has been very up and down, and no one cares about baseball. Sorry. It's just what it is. No one cares about tennis. No one cares about basketball. I mean, or baseball, softball. These are great things to pass the time and pass the spring, but if you're not good at the two major sports, which is men's basketball and, football, And if you're not, if you're not really good at those two sports, and you don't have South Carolina's women's basketball program or something like that, or UConn's women's basketball program, then you don't matter. Or tennis, what used to be for Tennessee. So I think the future is very much going to be, are these teams, are these programs matter? Do people want to watch? And I think that's problematic for the Vanderbilts and Mississippi States and Wake Forest of the world. They're going to get left behind. The question is, how long will it take until they get left behind? And, short answer is, I think in the next 15 years, it will change in a way. It may not be dramatic. It may just be a slow creep to, oh, well, that makes more sense. People want, I think a lot of SEC fans, if they were telling the truth, they wouldn't mind Florida State and Clemson being in the SEC. But there's like a pride thing too. But if you were to say, I got a deal for you, and this is the deal. We give the ACC Vanderbilt and Mississippi State, and we get North Carolina and Notre Dame. Everybody would take that. Everybody would take that. But the truth is that that's not going to happen, because Vanderbilt's been a great member for a long time, a charter member of the SEC. And the same thing goes for Mississippi State. And hey, by the way, if you think Vanderbilt doesn't have a good athletics program, you've not been watching baseball. You've not been watching like women's track. You've not been watching all the stuff that they do that's not football. They're really good at it. Not so good at football right now at all, and not good at men's basketball. But, I mean, not that far away from winning the national championship in baseball, and that matters too. So, but they could get squeezed out in the future because people want to watch Georgia play Michigan, Georgia play. If you had a situation where Georgia's preseason, non-SEC was Michigan, Wisconsin, you go to Michigan, Wisconsin comes to you, and then you play Notre Dame in Charlotte. Oh my God, people will go crazy for that. That's probably the future.